So,
Say part
part two. This is a 2-minute summary of what it means going from the personal to a turning point in history. The United States was fairly isolationist in the 1930s. What does a person do in that situation if he cares about the larger picture? In some way, he was part of a group of people who individually helped create the support for intervention. And it was through World Affairs Councils. There were several of them around the country. That was an important part for galvanizing and attracting support for intervention. So we could say that there's a role today for World Affairs Council to maintain, perhaps someone who's in this room will be inspired by some of this to say, okay, I'm going to start studying to see how we don't need to repeat some of our past failures. That's essentially what drew him into pulling together this World Affairs Council in Cleveland, because how do we prevent wars? How do we prepare for the next war? Which was one of the problems. If you're isolationist, you're not going to get involved with a war. And so there had to be a drumbeat too. He wrote an interesting statement. The price of peace would be parity in prosperity. Now, isn't that an SAT word? Parity in prosperity. If you want peace, then we're going to have to, we countries that have been outside of France, Germany, France, England, United States, the big powers, Italy and Germany and Japan would need prosperity in order to be peaceful. And so there had to be some sort of mechanism to promote prosperity. And this is part of that, the groundswell. You could say that the name of his, one of the conferences he put on was It Started in Cleveland. It was a report to the world. They had a conference, and a turning point. If we can find somewhere in here, there are turning points that led to the broader turning point.
The turning point that I see, a really huge one that I could really see a hook attached to it, is the Marshall Plan. In 1947, that is huge. That has never been done. A victor nation does not go in and rebuild the people that they've just decimated. That does not happen. It did happen in this case, and it provided us with a means to secure not only peace for, well, really until now, except for some wars, some adventures that we get into that in real terms, if you look at our foreign policy, we didn't have to get into. You know, we could use a Brooks Emeny today, okay, coming through. And I think we have Brooks Emenys today. Okay. You know, look at the, without going too political. But in here, are there materials in these papers that we could look to that we could pull out quotes from and say this is leading? And if Marshall had not given his speech in 1947 in
January,
Cleveland, where would he have given it? Would it have been given?
He had just been appointed. That's the interesting thing. He had just been appointed Secretary of State, and he was coming through Cleveland. And it was there that he first mentioned this, you know, geez, it's been 2 years since the defeat, 18 months since the defeat in Europe. Maybe there's time to rebuild, help them rebuild, because my grandfather witnessed the failure post-World War I, reparations,
and he
keeping down the
and he witnessed
defeat.
how that allowed Hitler to come to power.
Right.
So, and then, now his thesis, is there a way we can get a hold of his actual thesis that he wrote?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, because that would seem critical to this whole thing too. Now you have some enemy letters archive here. I haven't seen this one yet.
Yeah. In other words, this whole thing is the Emeny Letters Archive. This shows his genealogy. Now, is that part of, I think it says someone who came from middle class working stock could somehow transform himself into someone who understood these broader issues and then come back to Cleveland to teach it and inform enough people, 1,000 people gathering every week to hear ambassadors passing through. That was a transformation.
Why Cleveland?
He was born in Ohio.
But why is Cleveland this place? What has Cleveland got? LA I can understand.
Right.
I like LA. It's got nice weather. New York I can understand. Financial capital. Okay, Detroit at the time I can almost understand that. That's the auto industry. We've got the military. You know, Chicago, you know, with the broad shoulders, I understand all the trains going through there. What did Cleveland have?
It had someone on the council who recruited him, knowing that this son of Ohio was now finishing his doctorate degree in Yale. Where is he going to go? And he got this offer after teaching for 3 years at Yale. 1935, he's been transforming his thesis into a book that was sold. But I guess he took the challenge because if you could get something started in the heartland, which was fairly isolationist, we're thinking America first, isn't that?
Yeah,
The people who wanted to keep people out. Charles Lindbergh
right.
wanted to keep people out.
Well, he was a Nazi sympathizer too.
Okay. So go to Cleveland. If you could transform a Midwestern place.
If it plays in
Yeah, Pekokee.
Peoria.
Peoria.
Yeah, if it plays in Peoria, it'll go anywhere. Even though that was
Right.
Illinois, I mean, it's still the basic thing, right?
Right,
I got
if you can get something. So I'm putting myself as a secondary resource because I think I can help interpret some of these. And
Did you
I
ever
also
meet
know-
your grandpa?
I did. I went fishing with him. And when I was your age, I would spend summers with him. And he never talked about these sort of things because I was a mealy-headed teenager. And I didn't have any idea what he was doing. I just knew that he was retired. And he
Where'd
liked
you
to
get the
fish.
letters from?
His house, his widow, had sat on them.
Your grandma.
He was his second wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your step-grandma.
Step-grandma. And so when she died when she was 96. When she was about 94, this was about 8 years ago, I was rummaging around downstairs, found all these things. I find it interesting that this is dated 1926, but it's a Selectric typewriter in 1965-66. He had somebody type the letters so people could read them. This guy had a sense of history. He wanted somebody else to read this because his normal handwriting was a scrawl. That's very difficult to read.
Absolutely.
So he interpreted his chicken scratch for posterity. So you students are the first to read this.
And nobody else has it. This is primary source documentation. We're the only ones. You can't go on the internet and access any of this. There is no archive that has this in there. Nothing.
There are some things from 1942 that shows what he was doing as director of this World Affairs Council. Right. Some of the things that would indicate, we have some of his articles, so the mainsprings of world politics. So he had to be creating the atmosphere that would make it possible for Marshall to come in.
1947.
And so he was part of that turning point. So if you're looking for the Marshall Plan as a turning point, you look what goes into creating a council and what goes into creating that director. You can go back very far.
So just asking you for your vision here. Could you envision this project as, well, first of all, what medium would you use to display it? Is this better suited, you think, as a web page, as a documentary, as an exhibit? I don't think it really lends itself to being a performance, because those are the different areas that you can choose to present in National History Day, or a paper.
I have a photo from Time Life magazine, because Time, the magazine, and Life, the magazine with pictures, was a co-sponsor of this 1947 event. So you have a picture of the back of George Marshall at the podium and 2,000 people in the audience. So if you started with that picture and said, it started in Cleveland, and then you tell the story,
Beautiful.
going backwards, and then you just put the 2 points. Okay, in June 47, here's the text. That
So you're
Marshall
saying
said.
a documentary, pictures with a script that goes on behind it.
And it could just be a
then
poster.
letters that come up.
It could be something very simple. Here's the picture everybody thinks about Harvard, the start of the Marshall Plan. But 6 months before, January 1947, what was Marshall doing? He was speaking to a bunch of people about the situation in Europe.
And he chose your grandfather's WAC right there.
And
Okay.
there's a reason why Cleveland was chosen. That's right, because it was a receptive place in a area that was traditionally isolationist. It had been turned into a place where it was safe to talk about international affairs.
Perfect.
I'm very happy. 954-646-8246. That's my phone number.
I think we're going to do emails with you.
Okay.
Because it's
That's
just
fine.
a lot easier for the kids
Yeah,
to keep
that's
track that
fine.
way. But the phone number is nice.
Right? And
Okay.
yeah,
Let's
you
kill
can
it.
call and get it. Thank you. All right.
It's all good.
Or you could go Steve English Teacher at Gmail. Easy. Steve English Teacher. 3
One
words.
word.
Yeah, all together. Steve English Teacher at Gmail.
Works.